Today's episode is brought to you by Expona 2019. America's premier high-fidelity audio show takes place April 12th, 13th, and 14th at the Renaissance Schaumburg Hotel and Convention Center near Chicago, Illinois. Plan a trip to the Windy City this spring and sample over 190 listening rooms of high-end audio equipment, and explore the latest in headphone hi-fi in Expona's Ear Gear Expo. Tickets are available now at RAVENAUDIO.com. That's www.axpona.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Raven Audio. Raven Audio designs and builds the finest tube amps, speakers, and cables. Don't fall into the high-priced cable trap with fairy dust and voodoo. Raven Audio makes awesome-sounding cables for an even better price. You won't believe the price. Visit RAVENAUDIO.com today. That's RAVENAUDIO.com. We're back to back with the bees.
Back to back.
It's a lot of bees. Yeah. What have you been up to? Anything fun? Anything crazy?
Just the usual. Kid stuff, unfortunately.
Let's erase that. What has
Disneyland, Legoland. You name the land. I've been there, baby. Watching the Frozen 2 trailer on repeat. That's what happens when you have a 4-year-old and 2-year-old daughter. I'm not joking. You texted me. I didn't even know it was out. You texted me, and I said, I will not show this to my kids. Later that day, my preschooler came home and was like, did you hear, Dad? Did you hear? Everyone was talking about it at school. I'm like, we're already there in preschool. We talk about stuff at school. And I played it. Now my kids will not go to bed until they see what they call Elsa on the beach, because that's how it starts, with Elsa on the beach.
Oh, let's forget about all that and tell me, have you hobnobbed with any celebrities lately? Give me the gossip.
I'm directing this project in a few weeks. This little short advertisement thing, short film, and it's like Ed Asner, remember him from the 70s? Diane Cannon and Donna Mills are like the three people. Everyone on the other end listening to it is like, they're all still alive. And my answer to that is, we hope so when we shoot it next week.
And people don't. You shouldn't have said anything, because if you remember, there is a bee's curse.
Right, there is a curse. Well, that curse is going to continue, because after I shoot these people, there's a good possibility that they don't make it out of 2019. Especially poor Ed Asner. Yeah, we they turned in the script, and then his people wrote back, and they're like, "Is there any way Ed could just be sitting the entire time?" And we're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll figure that out." And we got a few other guys that have, a few other actors and actresses that have. From 70s television, got a lot of people from the Newhart Show and the Jeffersons and stuff like that. So it's going to be a fun little thing. We were doing the shot list today with the AD and the producer, and the opening is all these jokes from like these 70s sitcoms, and I only got 2 out of 3 of them. Wow. And I'm 45, so I'm kind of like, man, I don't know if any millennial is going to watch this thing, but we'll see.
In audio news, because I think we need to get one of those like siren sounds, news tickers to get the segment going. But we have, kind of a mishmash of things that came out in the past couple of weeks. On one side of things, we have the shit Ragnarok. They have a turntable coming out called the Soul Turntable, and also the AEGIR. I'm not exactly sure how to say that one, but he keeps up with the Norse naming nomenclature. So they have a new integrated update, and one of the things that got a lot of steam online was actually the Soul Turntable. So he's coming out with a turntable. So I think there was some confusion about the pricing, but he gave me the new pricing for it, and that'll be $599. But it does not come with a cartridge, but it does include a carbon fiber tone arm, or what they're calling an independent motor pod that sits off the frame of the turntable. So a new turntable by those guys. And on the other side of things, we have a brand that I first saw at Alma Music and Audio down in San Diego. Dan D'Agostino has something new coming out, where he had the Relentless monoblocks that were these massive monoblocks. He now has new Momentum Pre-HD that got a PR release pushed out this week. So he has a $40,000 HD pre-amplifier. That's shiny, and I gotta tell you, this stuff looks amazing to me. Physically, the metalwork is just crazy good. So I really like the way this stuff looks. I can't afford it myself, but if you're in the market, there is a new HD Momentum Pre out there to Google. I think oogle's the right word. Also, our friend Zach of ZMF headphones, now on the personal audio level, he's kind of crazy infatuation with all this exotic kind of limited edition thing. So he usually has one at launch. You can get it in stock. You can get it in a limited edition. He had a second wave. Almost every model of the new wave has a different type of alternative wood, and they vary from 1.4K to almost 2.7K. And just if you want to check that out, you just go to zmfheadphones.com. He has all these kind of fun, different limited editions. They're actually limited, quite limited in the fact that there's only going to be 30 pieces of each model. So if you're into kind of that thing. Also, cannot forget, 2 weeks away or less by the time you listen to this, Expona in Chicago. It's going to be a fun time. Most of the things I just mentioned will be there if you're in the Chicago area. It's always a really big, really fun show, and we will be there doing more podcasting for your listening pleasure. So all kinds of really interesting things on the horizon. Things are getting pumped up. We're getting pumped. So on the show, here we go. Alan Perkins, Spiral Groove Turntables. Bees?
I love a man who knows a good turntable.
Hey, everybody. We are with Alan Perkins, founder of Spiral Groove and designer of magnificent turntables. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And I just kind of wanted to, you were saying earlier that you were co-founder originally of Spiral Groove, but, you had another kind of investor. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. To really give you the full picture, I had been making turntables under the name RPM for quite a few years. And that started where I met a machinist in the prior job I was in. And we decided to work together on turntables. And he would make the parts. I would do the design and take care of sales, distribution, that kind of thing. And he was quite a bit older than me and somebody who was a good friend and somebody I felt close to and liked a lot. And he came to a point where he wanted to retire. And I said, well, I will keep making tables. I mean, that's my livelihood right now, etc. And he felt very strongly that he didn't want the name to go on without him.
Oh.
And there was no real technical reason for me to acquiesce. It was purely a friendship decision. But I thought, in a small industry like this, where people know who's making stuff, they kind of delve into the product quite a bit. It's not it's a very much a discretionary purchase where people spend time.
Yeah.
I thought I would be okay changing the name. I could rebuild a new name pretty quickly.
Okay.
And at that time, I had a retail showroom in Berkeley, California, where I live, and a customer who came in there wanted to buy into audio. She was enthralled with the audio world and very much into music. And, she came in and said, let me invest with you. I want to build this company with you. And so we started doing that together. And then what happened eventually is she had 5 companies, I think, and she had stretched herself too thin and the stock market fell. And so she had to, based on her financial advisors, she backed out of all the companies. She said, this is the only one that's working, but he says, I've got to stop all of these investments. So then I've been on my own since then. But,
What year was that?
I'm bad with those kind of things. But I believe it was I should look at my website. I wrote it down.
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's
anyway,
fine.
it's probably 10 years ago.
Around 10 years.
Yeah.
So let's go back even further. You were born, where were you born?
Alpena, Michigan.
Oh, I'm a Michigander as well.
You are?
Yeah, Grand Rapids, actually.
I went to grade school there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful little town. The west coast of Michigan, not enough people know this. It is so beautiful in the summer.
In the summer, like all of the Midwest, actually.
Yeah.
And the people are so nice there.
They are very nice. Coming from L.A., I can tell you they are very, very nice. But, it's pretty cold there in the winter. So I live in a warmer climate now. But so you're
Me too.
And
I give you a quick rundown because I did end up moving around quite a bit. My father was a construction worker, and my mom was a war bride, Australian. So, and my dad was the only child. So all of my cousins are Australians.
Interesting.
And so I was born in Alpena. My dad moved for a job, and then shortly after went to Australia to visit my mother's side of the family. I was 2 years old by then. We came back and moved to Spring Lake, Michigan. I went to grade school in Grand Haven, and in fourth grade moved to Wisconsin, where I really would say I grew up there. You know, I moved there in fourth grade, went to high school and college there, and moved from there to California when I was about 31.
So where did you get your education?
I went to University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
And did you major in something
I was
technical?
a music major.
Oh, music. There you go.
And after 4 years, I thought, I don't want to be a band director. And the emphasis there was in education. And I really love performing and playing and recording. I'm not interested in really being a teacher. I think, some people are really cut out for that. Yeah. And I recognize it's not a strength for me, especially with the younger kids, I think. Mm-hmm. So I decided after, I needed 2 or 3 classes for a bachelor's degree in music. But I thought, nah, I don't want that degree, so I'll do something else, but I'll take a break. So I moved to Japan for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Went to language school, exchange program kind of thing. Came back to Eau Claire, graduated with a psych degree and an Asian studies minor. So I have 180 college credits and a bachelor's degree.
So from there, you're fresh out of college, and you're going to where? Where you started setting out resumes to?
Well, I didn't. I was looking at some big corporations because I was trying to work with the Japanese language angle, but it didn't take me anywhere there. I think partly being in the Midwest, big companies like Xerox, 3M, companies like that. It's very different than had I been in someplace like LA or
Sure.
the West Coast, where there's a lot of Japanese people there and there's a lot going on. That probably would have been something I could leverage. But as it turned out, probably my last year of college, I walked into a high-end audio store and got into a debate with the salesman there that, I had a good audio system. And I had never really, I wasn't very aware of high-end.
Yeah.
But I should tell you how I found out about high-end. But anyway, just to finish this tract, that store ended up, the owner asked me if I could help him with sales, and I had time to do sales there and swap it for equipment. So I just started burning through gear.
Slave labor.
Yeah. Started burning through gear, high-end sweatshops. And got to know audio better and better and liked it. And then an opportunity came up to work in the audio industry and moved to California, which I'd wanted to do anyway, because at that time I was in Minneapolis. I lived in Minneapolis a total of about 9 months out of all this year up till. So I ended up moving to California. But the story about how I found out about high-end audio, though, I think is worth telling. It was when I was in Japan, because growing up in northern Wisconsin, 100 miles north of Green Bay, it was a town of 2,000 people with a paper mill and 13 bars. There were really no high-end audio stores there. Yeah. So I didn't really know this stuff existed. So after, in the evenings, I would often go to cafes in Japan. And gradually my Japanese improved, and I could talk to the owners, and they had this Stereo Sound magazine, which is this great Japanese, beautiful, glossy publication. It was, I think, quarterly then. And I kept looking at all this audio gear and thinking, man, they have the coolest stuff over here. Then gradually, as my Japanese improved, I started to be able to read little bits of it, and I found out all this cool gear was made in America by all these companies I'd never heard of. So really my introduction to American high-end was in Japanese coffee shops.
That's interesting.
Yeah. The owner of the store was Paul Joaquin, and the salesman I met, who I talked about audio with first, was Dave Hallquist, and those are the two main guys in Still Points. So they are also still industry, people.
Yeah, and as I've been doing these interviews, a lot of people got their start in retail that are now doing manufacturing and design and these types of things. It's been a very interesting kind of two roads chosen, and for a lot of audio people being one, people get inspired like you, and then a couple others that are like just education based. I always wanted to design speakers, and I was an engineer. So there's a lot of engineers. There's a lot of people that are just inspired by music that want to be closer to it. Would you say that you belong to that latter group then? Is audio your way of being closer to the music?
I think one of the things that happened to me when I was young is being in a small town that didn't have very high ceiling for expectations from people. And it was a small school. And my dad was, a construction worker. He wasn't a guy who really saw higher education as an important thing. And what happened is in testing, I always showed very high mechanical aptitude, like being able to, architect kind of spatial stuff, design. But when that showed up on tests and I would go to see the counselor at school, the suggestion was that perhaps if I went to trade school, I could be a car mechanic. And nobody had even suggested what an engineer was at that time. I didn't even know what that really was as a career, or certainly not industrial design.
Yeah.
So I think probably I had kind of a natural aptitude to that and a real love for design and art. And the love for music kind of brought me to audio that way. So I'm not a trained engineer. I'm a self-trained engineer and a self-trained industrial designer. And coming to audio, I would say actually, well, it was certainly through music, not through engineering.
What was your first like true blue audio file company that you worked for then?
Soda Turntables.
Soda.
Located in Chicago now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I went to, I kept upping my turntable. That was, like, I went through the audio stuff. I had small apartments, so I thought, I don't need bigger speakers. I'm happy with the electronics I have. But the front end makes such a difference, I found out, working in the retail store. So I kept putting this retail money back into my turntable and front end.
Okay.
And eventually I got a Soda turntable. I met them at a CES show. And
back when it was in Chicago?
Actually, it was still in Chicago, but I met them at the Vegas show that year. And that was a January show then as well, as it is now. By April, after meeting them at the show, I got a call, and they asked if I wanted to work for them. And it was to be the production manager of their speaker factory that they were starting to put together. But after I was there for about 3 months and I started doing turntable stuff, they let the original designer go. It turns out that he was not an invested partner, it seems, so they could kind of push him out. But I replaced him, and I worked there for a few years at least. And that was a very interesting experience. I met the machinist for RPM there. He was an employee there. Also, I worked a lot with David Fletcher, who's a really good physicist. He's a guy who I really enjoyed my time with him. I was able to bounce ideas off him and get another level of insight that I could not have gotten just trying to find things out myself, especially when the internet wasn't around to search for stuff I was interested in. But eventually they put that company up for sale, and I left and after about 3 years, I came to the last June Chicago CES show. And I was approached by a couple guys from Japan, and we founded Lyra.
Okay.
And so that was 4 of us, Stig Bjorg, Jonathan Carr, myself, and Peter Marais. And Peter was bringing electronics designs for phono stages. And I was bringing whatever I could bring, plus the U.S. distribution aspect of it. And the turntables, of course, fitting with cartridges. And but after about, I would say, 9 months, I felt like the business model wouldn't work for me, being in the U.S. with the time zone differences and just the expectations for the level of communication and the amount of agreement that was required before I could make decisions that dealers were waiting for. So at that point, I said I want to back out of membership in the company but retain being a distributor. We agreed on that, and so I continued distribution for 22 years.
Okay. So you worked in distribution after that for quite a while? Or
Well,
was that just
what
part
happened-
of what you were doing?
It was part of what I was doing, because what happened was that having that job in Soda, I wore a lot of hats there.
Yeah.
I looked at product. I was working in the factory, so I saw manufacturing every day. I tried to improve design, so I did design stuff. But also I went to all the shows, and I was the guy that people called for service. So I got hundreds and hundreds of conversations with customers that gave me design ideas and feedback and what is important to the public in a product. That was very, very, very valuable time spent.
What do you think are the features that people want the most on the turntable in your mind? Top 3. What were your 3 major observations that you came away with from those conversations?
First of all was reliability, because I was working in service. So every call I got was a complaint.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that their turntables had a high failure rate, but they were selling a lot of tables, and my position was to field complaints.
Yeah.
So what I learned is from that, and this I preface it that was because it's the perception of the sample I was taking, right?
Sure.
Reliability would be
Yeah.
number one, because that's the thing I heard that wasn't happening every time I got a call.
Yeah.
So for me, reliability was really tops. If you're going to sell something expensive, performance was tops. And I also thought, reliability comes in a lot of different forms. One is that it works when you open the box, but the other is that it doesn't need maintenance every 3 months or 6 months. Or, I thought all that stuff was bogus, and that it was a matter of poor design, because other products are reliable. Why shouldn't all products be reliable? That's a choice people make.
How do you think a service should be different from a low price product to a very expensive one? Is there something different about the high end that people, when you spend a lot on a product, they want X from service?
Right.
What do they want?
It's throwing out performance, right? We're just talking service. I think in a low price product, expectations are very low. If someone opens the box and it works and it costs $300, if it lasts for a year, after that they probably don't care, because probably it had a 3-month warranty in the first place. I've always given warranties that are more than 10 years, 10, 20-year warranties, because my thought is that I'm not going to make anything that's going to break before then. So if somebody breaks it, it's not a warranty issue. If someone's going to break it, they can break it. But what I make, I want to be able to turn that thing on, walk away for 20 years, and expect that when I come back, it's still going to perform. Yeah, okay, the belt could break. It's a more, part that's going to wear out. Yeah. But everything else on that table should work. And those first tables I made, the RPMs, I would say in the last year, I've repaired at least a dozen tables that people bought in 1990 to 95. They called me up and said, my table's working perfectly, but I've never sent it in for inspection, or it's never had a new belt, or does it need oil in the bearing? Do you do service? And I get them in and I refurbish them for a fairly low price. And it also gives me a chance to see how my designs have held up. And I think that has been, for me, something that, there are a lot of ways to view that in terms of reducing your own turnover for product. I mean, some people would like things to break in 3 months all the time and sell them a new one. But for me, I thought that reliability...
It's really too bad you can't put a firmware update down there to slow it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the turntable slows down a little bit. It's not quite right. Did you install the update? Well, it's time for a new model.
Yeah, right. Well, so I think a number one thing is reliability. So a performance should be given, but with a cheap product, expectations are lower. And the other expectation that I think came with high end was that people wanted to be closer to the designer. They're buying things because they feel there are differences between products. That's what the performance part is about, and that's what those choices are based on. So for them to have a chance to talk to somebody closer to the design or the designer themselves, I thought that was important to them, because whether they're knowledgeable, I mean, I get calls with people, they're looking for assurances, and some people call up and they're very specific and they're very knowledgeable. Other people just want a much more soft assurance. I mean, I've actually had a customer call me up and say, well, now if I get this turntable and I'm listening to Mozart, will I be happy? And I said, I don't do psychology. I have a degree, but I didn't do that for a reason. I can't tell you you're going to be happy. But on the more practical side, most people will say, well, is it easy to get a spare belt? And how does the motor work? Is it AC or DC? That.
Well, in your mind, what are like the kind of things that a turntable buyer should look out for in a low quality table, or things that could go wrong, or even in a high quality table? Like, what are the main 3 things that you should always look for in a table when you're purchasing something?
Well, first of all, I would say that some of the things that I would suggest would apply to anything. I mean, it would be the same as buying a pair of socks, I suppose. You want to know that it's made well, and you want to know that it's reliable, and then it's going to perform in a way that suits your tastes. So, if you want to go out on the weekend and you pick up chicks or pick up whatever you're interested in, you're probably not going to buy a minivan, So buy something that suits your needs and tastes. Mm-hmm. Not everybody does that. People will buy things because they read direct drive is better, or that belt drive is better, or that you need a sprung suspension, or that spring suspensions are bad, so you shouldn't buy a table like that. There are a lot of ways to build tables because there are many ways to approach the problem. And I think for a turntable purchaser, maybe the important thing would be to say, to know what are critical things that create the sound in the end. And those would be a really stable quality bearing that's quiet, materials in the platter that don't resonate or add noise to your system, and a way to isolate the turntable from the environment. Now, some tables use springs for that. Mine don't. I have reasons, and I tested a lot, that I don't think that's a good way to do things. Same with DC motors, including direct drive. Direct drive's problems, I think they've gotten smaller, and there's still some that are solvable. I think it's something some people haven't tried that could improve direct drive. I think you should listen. Like if myself, I think AC motors are much more accurate for turntables. They're harder to find good ones because DC motors are ubiquitous. I mean, that's what runs your car or windows. That's what runs pretty much everything, plain hydraulics. So lots of manufacturers make hundreds of different models of DC motors. So if you wanted to go out and buy a motor, DC's easy. ACs are harder to find, and particularly because they used to be using clocks, and digital clocks kind of took it out. So a lot of people made motors for wall clocks and things that were AC, and those companies don't bother anymore. Yeah. But I think that for me is the best way to drive a turntable platter. I'm not saying it's the best motor, but I think for a turntable platter, and it's the requirements there where you're talking about stability and reliability, low noise, I think that's the best choice. And for me, it has been. Now, there's some disadvantages because when you don't have direct drive, you need a belt. But the disadvantages that a belt present are very, very small and easily overcome. So going with the understanding that when you design something, it can't be perfect. So what you need to do is you need to choose your problems, right? These are the ones I can live with, and how can I minimize them?
Yeah.
To me, that's the design approach you should take, is that expect that it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be problems, but choose those problems and minimize their effect.
What in your mind would be, if you had limitless budget, limitless access, is there one specific thing that you would consider to be the largest hurdle that you're always trying to jump over? If you had, that you just remove that variable altogether, this sound would be the best. What kind of problem, hurdle do you work with that you'd like to see?
I can't give you a thing for that because I think I've done a pretty good job in looking at the problems and minimizing them. So it's kind of where, to me, they're all in control. There's not a problem anymore that is a glaring problem. If you could eliminate effects from the room better, that's always good. I mean, a lot of people are using very expensive and sophisticated isolation bases. And my feeling is that if you've got a bad room, that's going to be a tremendous improvement. But to build it into the turntable for all those people that don't have bad rooms and spend a lot of money on high-quality racks, I kind of felt like I didn't design that into the table because that's an easily solved problem with aftermarket products.
What are your thoughts on the maglev table that was at Munich a few years ago? Did you see that? It's just,
I'll tell you, I don't know who made it. I don't want to know their name because I don't want to badmouth anybody. But I think it's a really dumb idea. I mean, just bluntly, because what you are trying to do is to create the most stable platform possible to play a record on. So anytime you're introducing springs and multiple springs, because you've already got a number of springs, right? First of all, the magnet system is a spring. Mm-hmm. Now, you've added that to the cartridge suspension. You've added that to the arm, which is another type of spring resonance system. Yep. So you combine all these, and what you get is problem. I think, unfortunately, one of the things that happens is people seek gimmicks that are interesting marketing-wise. They can understand that what I call the gimmick, let's say that there's an advantage. Like, I can tell you the advantages to a magnetic levitated platter, and it would be isolation, right? But there are many ways to get isolation, and there aren't many ways to fix the problems the magnetic levitation brings. So to me, it's a gimmick. That's why I say that. It kind of is a complicated solution to a non-existent problem. Mm-hmm. And the spiral groove, all of the design principles in the RPMs are also in the spiral groove tables, but the difference in refinement is huge. And I noticed I didn't say even to say the difference in the performance, because the RPMs actually perform at a very high level. I think people right now buying those used for $3,000 or $5,000, they're getting something they couldn't buy new performance-wise for $10,000 or $15,000 now, typically. So I think there's still a great value on the used market. But if you look at my bearing design, for example, in the RPM, that was made with, let me think quickly here, like 6 parts. So like I took a steel shaft that I could get made one way, and I attached it to an aluminum piece that I could get made a certain shape, etc. Now, what I could do when I went to Spiral Groove was through different machine shops that had much more sophisticated multi-axis lathes, I would be able to take something that was 3 parts and make it one complex part. Now, that drives the price up. So Spiral Groove does cost more than RPM did by a lot. However, using 2 parts instead of 6 drives the tolerance precision way up as well. So Spiral Groove is made to much higher tolerances, even though if you looked at the two things side by side, you could certainly see they're very, very similar. The principles behind them are identical, I would say.
Okay. How has the brand grown to you in the last 10 years?
I've expanded my materials choices. A lot of stuff that's available now was not very available that long ago. I mean, prices of materials and the number of people who can work with certain materials like titanium or graphite. I think I've really upped my skill level with 3D design programming. And I've been able to prototype parts with a 3D printer. And now I've been able to learn how to design for 3D printing to the point where I think where, for example, the Spiral Groove table upstairs right now has 3D printed parts in it. Those parts I don't have to even talk about them being 3D printed. One's not even visible. But what it did was allow me to, instead of making a solid aluminum part or taking 3 pieces of aluminum and screwing them together to make a part, I could print one part out of honeycomb carbon fiber impregnated high-strength nylon and lay carbon fiber layers in that part and come up with something about as strong as T4 aluminum that weighs almost nothing. So there's no energy storage and there's no multiple parts things. So it's very quiet compared to what I could make. But
how long does that process take for you to prototype with the honeycomb and
It's way faster if you have the machine. It's way faster because, for example, one of the parts on the Spiral Groove table upstairs is an arm board. And if I say that to print that arm board took, I think, 32 hours. Now, that sounds like a really long time. But if I sat down with a CAD program And instead of going from CAD to 3D files and just print that part, I went from a CAD program to paper type 2-dimensional drawings, all spec'd out. I went to a machine shop and spent a day with them, and they said they could get me a part in 3 weeks. And then I could test that part and correct it. And they could get me another part in 3 weeks to test that part again. 32 hours is really fast, right? So when you look at the speed of printing, some people are really kind of turned off by it because it seems slow. But in the process of really making prototypes, and even in production now for some lower volume runs, it's way faster than going to machine shops. But there's another mistake I think that I see, and I've talked to 3D printer people about this. People will go to the 3D printer company and say, here are my aluminum, these are my drawings for my parts. Can you make these? And why would you even get a 3D printer to make an aluminum part? I mean, to me, there's not a reason to do that. You make a 3D printed part because there's the advantage of making it 3D. It's not simply that it's cheaper than aluminum or faster than aluminum. And you have to design differently for it. Machining is a subtractive process. You take a piece of metal, you put it in a machine, and it cuts away all the parts on the outside you don't need. 3D printing, at least what I was doing, is an additive process. And to tell you a simple way to conceptualize the difference, if you were to take a chunk of aluminum, you could cut it into a sphere, like a ball bearing. But with a 3D printed sphere, it can be hollow. You cannot make a metal ball that's also hollow on a lathe. It's just obviously impossible. But you can print a hollow sphere that has no openings in it on the outside when it's done with 3D printing. So that's just a simple example. But if you keep that mindset through a design process, you find that you're designing with very different intent. Mm-hmm. And it creates different parts. And then when you start to do that, then you can see the value in that difference. It didn't mean I don't make aluminum parts anymore. It just gives me another color on the palette, so to speak, mm-hmm. or process to take advantage of to make whatever it is I'm working on, to make it better. So that's been interesting, and that's all within like the last 12 months for me.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Do you think that there's like another stage to manufacturing that you just love to kind of...
Yeah, 3D metal printing.
Yeah.
But that's all... You can't get much there under $100,000. People think of 3D printers like, if you go to Walmart, they're only $250. The parts they make, it kind of looks like something that was squeezed out of a toothpaste tube.
Yeah.
The printer I'm talking about with parts upstairs that can print with carbon fiber layering and stuff like that, that's $70,000. And it can't even print something 12 inches big, in width. It's a small bed still. But it prints with something, very similar to T4 aluminum in strength.
Yeah.
And it's an additive process. So that opens up a lot of possibilities.
Mm.
Yeah.
Audiophiles and especially turntables have been around for quite a long time. And they really haven't changed the main function of it. And a lot of all digital aside, it's, there's a lot of changes going on in digital right now, but the core of the audiophile kingdom hasn't really changed that much. Do you kind of feel like there's been any stagnation in the innovation in that department?
Yeah, I think the industry lacks innovation. That would be like a first criticism I would have of the industry. And in some ways, if you look at things like tube designs, many of the circuit designs being worked with now were the same as in the 50s. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was a good idea in the first place. Cartridges are working on the same principles they were in the 40s. And cartridges have steadily improved. But I think there's a real lack of innovation in cartridge design. And what is steadily improved is an understanding of what matters, so they address resonances and other mechanical things. And they've improved the ability to manufacture smart parts in small scale. And they've been able to work with better performing materials. But the designs themselves are just kind of the same. And I've tried to change tone arm designs. Like I have a patented counterweight. I have, like my turntable bearing is a very unique bearing shape. I tried to do that by saying, what are we going for here? I mean, what is a turntable bearing really doing? Well, we all know it allows a platter to spin, so that's pretty obvious. But for the sake of playing a record, for having the steadiest rotational speed, for having the least amount of noise brought into the system, for still giving durability to the system, ease of use, all that, what would work best? So to go back to the fundamental requirements of a turntable's bearing, not just how bearings in general work, I think that I would like to see more of that through all of the products in the industry. There are a lot of products that are definitely Me Too. They've come in and they've thought everybody would buy this because the record plays vertically or something like that. I mean, those kind of ideas just do not push the state of the art. And what's unfortunate is that customers, they can't necessarily discern between marketing and engineering. And marketing claims are always strong and boastful, and engineering things are kind of invisible. So it's a hard battle to fight when, as a designer or a manufacturer, and you see other people put something out that the customer and the markets get real excited about, and you look at it and say, they did nothing to make this a better world, so to speak. The audio world is not better for this. And all these people buying these things are either going to be disappointed or think they got something good and not move on when they, to me, though, that's a problem. I would like to see more innovation, and I would like to see people market innovation with explanations of really what makes it better and back that up with something.
With so much invested in the analog side of things, do you have any opinions on the current state of the digital? Do you listen to digital at home? What do you think of the sound of digital in general?
Well, I listen to digital far more than I listen to analog. But I pretty much only have a turntable in my stereo. But what I have is a recording studio for, my bands. And so I record at, all different sampling rates. I listen to different mics, different pre's. And I think that has taught me more about music reproduction than I ever learned from the audio side of it. And that's why when you see somebody like Stereophiles editor John Atkinson, who does recording, he's a recording engineer, puts recordings out. I know his knowledge as an editor and reviewer is very different than somebody who hasn't had that experience. So for me, being involved with digital is important, and I do listen to it a real lot, but I still like records. And I'm not going to say that it's because I think everything about them is better. But there are a lot of things about them I like, and that's good enough.
What do you kind of think about the current state of digital audio as it applies to audio files? Because we have a lot of DACs going on. DACs are flying off the shelf, new ones every year. There's a lot of different file type stuff going on right now. What do you kind of take in all that? Having been through the same thing with analog at some point.
Well, I mean, I'm encouraged that people keep refining things and make them better. So I think digital has come a long way to being a better system. I'm not sure that comparing to analog should be like a gold standard. I mean, when digital came out, it was, because it really did not come close to the quality of vinyl. CDs, anybody who had any quality turntable knew a CD was not a very good source of music. But that's not where digital is right now. And so I kind of think they can live, parallel to each other, and they don't have to be compared to each other all the time. And I think people buy different things for different reasons. But just in terms of a pure technical answer, I guess I'm happy to see digital really, really improving. I'm glad that there are ways now that it could be given to people, because obviously CDs were very limited. That was locked into a sample rate and bit depth that was not sufficient. So now with streaming and other methods, it's more like the world of photography regarding digital. We went from film to digital, and I still have a wet darkroom at my house. I still shoot black and white film, but I have digital cameras too. Digital cameras, like every one of them, it's better. It's a bigger sensor, it's a better this, better that, and it was an open-ended system that let that advancements happen. That's been the issue with audio, is that we got locked into that Blue Book standard and the CD player that plays it back. And we were locked into a poor standard. So it's taken a long time and a lot of complaining. Now, to me, the next problem is that most of the music made isn't recorded well, and a lot of that has to do with people who grew up in a digital world, and they have low expectations. So now there's a whole generation of studio engineers that never experienced analog and don't know what it is people are looking for in that sound, and they're making things that just, I think they think it's good, but they don't know the difference.
I actually sat in on a seminar where they surveyed a bunch of kids who had only heard like MP3 quality for their whole life, and they played them better quality, and they said, which is correct, which is right, and they said, no, this is what it sounds like. MP3 is what it sounds like. You know, we're all imprinted very young in age. Most of what you love in your life, I feel like, is started from a very young age, and it never leaves you. Right. But the other side to that coin is that the kids, when you trained them, hey, check this out, see how this sounds better, their knee-jerk reaction is to go back to what they're familiar with. But they can be trained. People can realize, oh, better quality. They can see it, and they can hear, and they can be pointed out to them. But that very thing you're talking about, the MP3, it's like when it's set as a standard, they don't know any better. They kind of like get familiar with it and becomes the way things should sound. Now, I don't think that we've moved away from that pretty quickly. That was like post-Napster. Because I remember downloading Napster, and it was like 64 was the highest resolution, and it was really, 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 really horrible. And you're just like, it's almost unlistenable, but it's not. It was like kind of distorting, but not really distorting. So it wasn't like the natural distortion you're used to. But we got away from that, and now we're moving, and with this streaming, and there's high quality streaming, we're kind of getting along the way. I think that we're kind of hitting a benchmark. Now, it doesn't, to my ears, it's not the same as analog. The quality is going up, but there's a certain amount of uniqueness to the sound of tube and records combination.
Yeah, as the quality improves with digital, I think the bigger issue is still how the recordings are being done. Yeah. All the marketing stuff that's gone on, people's perceptions of what analog even is. People who have never heard it, they have come with preconceptions. I go to YouTube once in a while, and I'll just go YouTube music, just put something on my iPad. People are over for dinner, whatever, and somebody has been downloading, it says albums, and it's just, it's just older stuff that was recorded analog, like, Crosby, Stills, Nash, or, stuff from that era. And I've listened to a bunch of the YouTube stuff, and it's all advertising it being analog from an album, and it's full of pops and ticks. So I went back and did a few comparisons, and some of the pops and ticks are on the same spot in different albums. And I'm thinking somebody has put some sort of, because they used to have, someone made an analog so-called filter that would put pops and ticks on digital to make it sound more analog, they thought. Someone's put, I don't even know if that's off a CD or record. All I know is that someone thinks pops and ticks makes it sound like analog. And that's sad. That to me is really sad, especially to see hundreds of thousands of hits on YouTube on those albums. I think how many people are getting educated, so to speak, that's what analog is about.
Yeah, and when I do have a couple of production people in Los Angeles that I've kept in contact with over the years, and when I first started doing this, I was like, hey, what kind of headphones do you use, or what are the speakers like? And the first thing all these guys ever said was, whatever my audience is listening on. So if they're going to be listening on Beats, I'm going to buy a pair of Beats.
Well, again, that speaks to the difference in goals between people. If somebody's making music to sound its best on bad headphones, then their goal is to sell it to the biggest market. Their goal was never to make the best sound. Yeah.
And isn't that essentially the downfall of where we gotten with production? Is that they were trying to, and listen, I'm not going to fault anybody for trying to make money, whatever, but at the sacrifice of what is maybe best or truest. I mean, there is a nugget of truth in having sound that is recreated closer to the source. Yeah. In a way, you might be betraying that existential truth of the music, but at the same time, I don't know, kids these days.
Yeah. Well, that to me comes up to someone saying, "Yeah, I don't have any standards. What, just throw whatever at the wall and see what sticks. And if that sells, that's what I'm going to sell." This is what has made me a bad capitalist, probably, is that part of what I think I'm responsible for is showing people what good things are and educating them about why my product is what it is. It's not what the approach everybody takes. Other people will come in and say, "Man, I've never owned a record in my life, but everybody's selling them right now, and I got 3 friends with a chainsaw, and let's go to the garage and make turntables, and we'll tell them they're the best, and I made some money this year." And I think, yeah, you made a piece of crap, and you've taken people's money and confused a lot of people.
Well, you bring up something really interesting that I've touched on other podcasts is how often do you see that scenario? Because it happens in loudspeakers as well. There's the loudspeakers here are very expensive, and there's a small market of people who are willing to spend $20,000, $30,000 on a speaker. People see that, and every couple of years, every so often, you see someone show up with a box with drivers in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying now is that same pattern happens in turntable land?
It's in everything we do.
They
everything.
Show up with the...
Yeah, I mean, when it was clear that...
Are you going to say name names? Because
I don't want to name names.
But,
let's just say it was clear that when portable devices became the thing, that the headphone market became huge. And if you look at people who, for years, like Bayer Dynamic, Audio-Technica, Sennheiser, Shure, these companies worked on the quality headphones forever. But then all of these little crappy brands just sprouted right up when that market grew with portable devices. They make crap headphones, and in some cases they've had perhaps even the world's largest company has the ability for their marketing. And people are out there seeing it on TV. They see it in kiosks at the airport. Their favorite rock stars or hip-hop artists are wearing those headphones. And there you go. They think it's good because of that. And it was never good. It was sold well.
I do think, though, however, in a very short time, since the money has come, the market has evolved, and we're seeing some phenomenal levels of resolution and appeasing quality from headphones that wasn't there before.
That's right.
And and of course, it couldn't really happen if there's no money. There's got to be some money to have. But since then, there is a good... we can thank... This has been well trodden in many audiophile conversations, but we can thank Beats for higher quality in other people's companies now because they brought in the money, they brought in the thing, right place, right time, push it out into the public consciousness, and then other people now. I'm not saying Beats are the best. I'm just saying because of them, we have better quality. The whole line, the whole level of the lake has risen.
Yeah. That phenomenon can happen because, first of all, you can't sell stuff that people don't want to buy. So here we've got this hugely expanding market. That brings in all types. It brings in those people that will say, I always wanted to make an $8,000 pair of cost no objects best in the world headphones, but I didn't think there were enough people in the world buying headphones. And then there are all those other people say, well, a billion people needs headphones, so if we can make them for 9 cents instead of 10 cents, we'll make another billion pennies, So it cuts both ways. But obviously, without a demand, neither can happen. So, yes, the same thing that brings the bad can bring the good.
So in that kind of same idea, have you seen any uptick on your end from this hipster revolution of turntable love that kind of spiked recently?
Yes and no. For Spiral Groove, I'd kind of say no. I would say more, I get more Facebook likes because there are more people out there looking at turntables, but those people discovering turntables don't buy $35,000 turntables. So it hasn't made Spiral Groove grow, really. But it hasn't hurt it in any way, that's for sure. And I shouldn't say it hasn't made it grow. Perhaps it made it grow some small amount. Pretty hard to measure. But what's happened is that people wanting to make lower-priced turntables have come to me for consulting work. So it's made my career grow, even though my company hasn't really.
I can't help but think about this example of when I went into, I think it was an Amazon or Barnes & Noble or something, and so insane. no CDs, but a wall of vinyl.
Yeah.
It's like an audiophile's dream. A mainstream brick and mortar
Yes.
place just switched hands on us, like boom. And I was like, this is like everybody's. You can download stuff now. This is the only thing physical you need.
Yeah. I last year saw vinyl at like Marshall's or Ross or one of the discounted resellers for clothes where I love to buy all those garments no one else sees. It's not that kind of place. But they had vinyl at the checkout. So.
Shopping secrets.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that the movement's been fun. It's been interesting overall. I do think that those guys are looking at entry level stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
But the positive affinity overall for analog, can you see a time period where it disappears? The technology, not finally, I don't want it to go, but over the long enough timeline, things shift. Stuff has already happened. We'd never thought, is this thing going to disappear? And in your mind, how long would that be?
Well, to disappear, I say, yeah, everything does. But what that timeline is, that's the hard question. I would go to photography again for an example. People still shoot with black and white film because it gives them something that they really like. And some people, it's because they're older and they like the process and they grew up with that process. But other people like that aesthetic. And I think that may be more of a parallel for analog, that even if digital technically surpasses everything someone wants about listening to music, some people may just want records anyway because they like records. It's the same reason someone will buy an old tube receiver to listen to FM radio instead of the latest quartz locked or whatever it might be, or stream it live. There's some nostalgia there too. So, that's a hard question because it's a very different question than saying when will digital surpass the quality of vinyl? That's a very different question to say how long vinyl will be around, I think. Why
do you think that there was a resurgence of vinyl in your mind? Anything that you can tell from your perspective? Like, dude, this is kind of crazy, right? We were going along this path. Digital quality is going up too. We're getting away from Napster, and all of a sudden, there's a resurgence of vinyl just dropped in the middle of the 2000s.
Yeah, I think it has nothing to do with analog. It has nothing to do with vinyl. I mean, the resurgence in vinyl, my opinion, in this, a lot of my friends in this industry may want to shoot me if they hear this. I think it has to do with a lack of tactile experience in our lives, that we can put our whole life in a phone. To me, that scares the crap out of me, and it's not tangible. That music having 1,000 songs or whatever it could be in a phone or some portable device, and that you're still just carrying this one device. There's nothing there to see or hold or touch or experience. And I think that if you look at that as a phenomenon where people are saying, I want more tangible experiences in my life, I want more things I can hold, I want more things I can really understand, so to speak. It's not a technical challenge to understand or have this experience. And in that kind of vacuum or needs as a person, I think records were just kind of the obvious thing. It's retro, so it's kind of a slap to social conventions now. It's a step backwards that says, no, I'm not going to be, led along by the nose. Then they can go to used record stores and find all kinds of inexpensive vinyl. They can see a whole era of history that they didn't grow up in. And it's got real quality music in it, things that anybody can enjoy at any age or any time in history. So I think there are a lot of reasons for the vinyl resurgence. Most of the people buying vinyl, there's a lot of used sales. And they're buying $200 or $300 turntables. They're not playing them through high-end systems. And some people buy vinyl that don't even play it. They just put it on the wall. It's kind of a thing their friends do. It's like, I don't know, collect baseball cards, but I don't eat gum or something. The resurgence in vinyl for me is a big social question, and it has a lot of socially or societal, interesting things to discuss. But I wouldn't argue that anybody's buying it for the quality, because most of those people are playing it on crap systems through used gear.
Yeah, I think when you kind of look at the most recent, there's a movie that came out recently called Ready Player One, and it just kind of goes in on this idea of having everything become virtual. You use the word tactile, like something you can touch and feel. We are moving towards a society in general that nothing is really tactile. It's all going to be virtual.
Yeah.
I mean, the virtual currencies right now is no joke.
No.
In game. For video game playing, which is a huge part of this, huge segment of this, affects a lot of people. A lot of people play video games. There's currency, items. These things are bought and sold with real money. They're just as real as these things. And I couldn't agree more. There's a knee-jerk response to the idea that we are sliding into a society that doesn't really exist on this plane anymore.
Yeah.
Just what we create. And I think there's a small amount of fear involved with that. Like, whoa.
I would say, as you see virtual currencies gain in popularity, I bet that will be tracked will be tracked with gold and silver sales, because people will want to invest in something they can hide under their bed, because there's nothing real about virtual currency. I mean, it is real, but in a different way humans experience through the senses. And we talk about virtual reality. You brought this up. And I've recently seen how there's a virtual reality system coming out soon where you'll be able to go to a concert with your friends, right? Because you'll be at home wearing the virtual reality system, and your friends will be at home doing that, but you'll all have a feed to a live concert. And then, the ad I saw, it says you don't have to leave the house, but you can be with your friends and you can have the experience and have all the fun. And I thought, man, I don't get that, because when I think back to concerts, there's no way a pair of virtual reality glasses are really going to give me the tactile sense of being in a room full of people. I mean, I could think back to concerts, and it includes smells. You're not going to have that.
I was just going to say, are they going to squirt like
right.
hashing?
Yeah, where it's going to be someone smoking a cigarette, everyone's dancing and sweaty, someone lit a joint in the corner, right? All that stuff, that's not going to be part of that experience. And there will be, I think, a backlash to that. Just like we were describing, having digital versus vinyl.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that I hadn't really considered as we all slid down this path together. Was that over time there will be counter movements to what is natural, what is I don't have any particular issue with this virtual kind of thing we're going to, but it is not very primal. Like, we can trick ourselves, but the hunter-gatherer roles that we have assumed are going they're going so far away from where we are that it's so much about convenience, right? Everything's about convenience now.
Yeah.
Where it's like we used to have to do these things to survive.
Yeah.
Well, what happens when that box is checked? Oh, we can survive now. Or what happens when we need like these small boosts of pleasure? Oh, we checked it. Now it's all pleasure. All the time, anything you want. In virtual world, we're talking going beyond material possession. We're talking about, like you just said, experiences. Whatever experience you literally want. The concert with your friends, people love that stuff. It's part of who shapes you early on, I think, and it's one of the few cultural things that we do as a society that's based on like raw emotion.
Yeah,
you go there, and what's really happening? There's lights and there's sound waves. But people go there and they are just dropped into an emotional situation where they're connected to them.
Yeah.
And these guys, it's not just with the person on stage. Like, why would you go there with your friend? Because you want to be, you feel connected with them as much as you're connected with the music and the artist.
Or I even learned silly skills like how to walk away from drunk people who want to pick fights. You won't learn that in a virtual world probably unless they create the drunk avatar. It's kind of the thing they could throw it in. But
so you're saying I'm not going to find Alan in the mosh pit anytime soon?
You might. I mean, I don't reject any of that stuff as shouldn't happen or it's bad. I just think people see new as better. That to me is a common mistake, is people see something as better when it's simply just new and different. New and different can lead to better. And sometimes new and different is better, but it's not always. And I think too often we just throw a lot of good things aside for change, when we really need to take a step back and say, wait, there was some real value there. Are we really throwing that out Are we really willing to throw all that out just to have a different delivery system, for example, as CD versus vinyl, that kind of thing? Yeah, okay, so we got CDs. What did that mean? We could listen to Beethoven's symphony without flipping something over. Mm-hmm. We could fit it, the same thing. We could carry it from our house to our car. So those are all really good things, but we lost sonic quality for that, and that wasn't discussed in the beginning.
I need to go to a concert, I think. I haven't been in a while. After I just described that to you,
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I could really use a concert.
Well, I play music with 3 different bands at least. I mean, even on the way down here, I don't know if you heard my phone ding, but it was a set list for an upcoming gig that someone just emailed me. And so to me, I still have that real music connection. And, playing jazz on a drum set and listening to great music, it's very humbling. I think there's a good thing about that. It gives me a different perspective on the skill level of other players because there's so many great players out there. But anyway.
Do you have a reco for an audiophile quality jazz track? Maybe a couple if you got them in your back pocket that you just absolutely love. High production, great songwriting.
I don't really. I mean, I love so much music, but there are very few cases where performance, material quality, and production quality all come together. You can find examples of any 3, but not all.
Is it an
together.
inverse relationship in a way?
Not
by design, but just by...
Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a certain type of improvisational group, and you and your 3 or 4 buddies, you're pounding out rock and roll, and you're really improvisational, and you decide you want to go record. Now you get into the studio, and suddenly there's a red light, there's headphones, some engineers taping your microphone down, there's all these distractions. So by the time that engineering process is through, the performance quality is very likely going to drop a lot, even though the sound got better than walking in and just playing to 2 mics. Well, I don't know, maybe 2 mics can be better. I know it can be better, but just to make my example. So it's hard to find examples where all those things align. Most of the time, the people who really love sound, like a lot of the audiophile labels we see, they do really, really fine recordings, but don't have access to the popular artists or necessarily the top artists at anything they do. So, the way they do that is they find groups that are maybe second-rate performers, but this record sounds great. Or they do small group things because it costs less to pay fewer people. But off the top of my head, where that all came into one thing, so many people love the sound of Steely Dan records. I don't. I think their best record was probably Katie Lied, and it's very clearly analog, but I think the performances were better up till then. After that, when the digital things came in, everybody talked about the pristine quality and the perfection, but those songs lost something for me, and I love that band. I bring it up as an example of something I really love that I think it didn't necessarily improve for its production improvements.
I will say this, though. In terms of audiophile recordings, I've heard some stellar jobs with jazz, drum, kind of like either when it has a nice intro, or I'm talking about like it's not just the toms, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like you can, on a really nice system, I feel like if you have a good jazz drum intro, you can literally see it laid out in front of you. Like they did it intentionally, like you're the drummer.
Yeah.
You can mic it all kinds of ways in the mix. And very rarely, but the audiophile recordings will do this, where it'll be like you're the drummer. And the cymbal, like the ride is like right here floating, and then the drum is like... And it's phenomenal because you really have to. It has to. I bring up the solo part because when you're playing a full band mix, it's just not really practical to have that kind of like layout all the time.
You can't.
Yeah,
it doesn't fit.
You have to balance with the other sounds.
Yeah.
But if you get a chance to like get in there and you find something, I think it's just a phenomenal kind of experience.
Yeah. Well, there are some really good drum albums. Sheffield Lab made a direct-to-disc one, and there are some really good ones, but they're they're just drummers in the case of that one. It's not not a band with them even, but if you want to hear a really well mic'd drum set, there it is.
I'm sorry, you're saying the whole entire album is just drums?
Yeah. One side I think was Jim Keltner and the other was Ronnie Tutt. I'm just thinking back, it's years ago. I'm sure have it someplace way in the back of my record collection, but it was just drums, like free playing drummer, one on each side of the album.
Is this a set or like a different percussion? And
No, set drummers.
So
like Jim Keltner was one, I believe.
Wow. I can honestly say I've never heard anyone try to go do. I'm doing a drum album. It's just drums.
And the reason was they wanted to have an example of well mic'd live drums. It's a direct-to-disc record, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I mean, it's a great thing to listen to once.
I'm really sorry, but I was like, that's exactly. I'm like, that's good to one track. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good. I like a little melody. I've said this many times before. I like a little melody in my songs. That's just me.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and it's been very informative.
Oh, well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun.